Fake HOA cops tried to raid Black Man's ranch. They had no idea he's a Navy SEAL. Marcus Reed leaned back in his battered rocking chair, the old wood groaning softly under his weight as he sipped his morning coffee. Steam curled into the chill Montana air, carrying the rich scent of fresh grounds. Before him stretched 120 acres of wild land, rolling pastures, craggy trees, and a battered red barn that had seen better decades. It was his now, every inch of it bought with sweat, deployments, and the kind of silence only a Navy SEAL could carry without breaking. The ranch had no name on a sign out front. No manicured hedges, no white picket fences, just a gravel drive, a wire gate, and the quiet assertion of a man who had fought his whole life for a place that didn't tell him who he had to be. Freedom had a texture here. It was in the way the wind pushed against the fields. It was in the deep hum of cicadas at night. It was in the silence that didn't expect anything from him, which is why the white plastic sign caught him so off guard. Property under HOA review. He stared at it for a full minute, coffee cooling between his fingers, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. They didn't. The sign had been zip-tied to his front fence like it belonged there, bold black lettering screaming rules into a place built on defiance. Marcus scanned the gravel drive but saw no car tracks fresh enough to blame. No signatures, no notes, just the stark sign snapping slightly in the breeze like a white flag of war he hadn't agreed to raise. He yanked it down without ceremony, crumpled it in one calloused hand, and tossed it into the burn barrel by the side of the porch. The flames licked up hungrily, swallowing the insult in seconds. Probably kids, he thought, giving the simplest answer too much credit. He dusted his hands on his jeans and turned back toward the house. By noon, another sign was up. This time it was laminated. Compliance required by Simmons Valley HOA. The letters were larger, angrier. Marcus pulled it down again, slower this time. His breath left him in a long, measured exhale. He turned the sign over. No official stamps. No county insignias, just an address and a phone number written in cheap marker on the back. He didn't call. He built perimeters for a living. He dismantled systems of control halfway across the world. He wasn't about to invite it into his own backyard. But that night, sitting on his porch again under a sliver of bruised moonlight, he saw headlights crawling up the gravel. Not a neighbor, not a friendly face. A hospital-gray SUV rolled to a stop by his gate, idling with the kind of entitled hum that rubbed every nerve in Marcus's spine the wrong way. A woman stepped out. Mid-50s. Crisp khakis, pastel pink button-up tucked in with militant precision. A clipboard clutched like a sidearm. He didn't move from the chair. She marched up to the gate and smiled like they were old friends. "Hi there," she chirped, voice bright and brittle. "I'm Karen Whitmore, Simmons Valley HOA president. Just wanted to stop by and personally welcome you to the community." Marcus rested the mug against his thigh. "Didn't know we had an HOA out here." Karen's smile sharpened. "We're a chartered coalition focused on maintaining environmental and visual standards across the region. You should have received our welcome packet." He gave a small shake of his head, more breath than words. "No worries," she said brightly, pulling a thick manila envelope from under her arm and sliding it through the gap in the gate. "All the information's right there. We're currently in the awareness phase. Citations will begin end of the month." She turned with a snap of her orthopedic heel and walked back to her car like her work here was done. Marcus didn't open the packet right away. He stood there, envelope dangling from his hand, watching the SUV recede into the night. When he finally slid it open with his pocket knife, the papers spilled out like confetti at a funeral. Pages of regulations, fence height restrictions, barn color mandates. Goat-to-acre ratios. even a complaint about visible satellite equipment disrupting skyline harmony. Skyline harmony. Marcus closed the packet and dropped it directly into the burn barrel without another glance. The next morning there were more signs. Bigger, brighter. This time nailed directly into his fence posts, one stapled to the side of his barn. Marcus's hands itched. His instincts prickled. This wasn't kids. This wasn't some board committee playing mayor. This was targeted. This was escalation. He pulled the signs down with slow, deliberate hands, tossing them into the same barrel, watching them burn. He could feel it, the old hum starting low in his ribs, the one that whispered about threat assessment and angles of attack. He hadn't needed it for a long time. He hadn't wanted to need it ever again. But the land didn't lie, and neither did the signs. The next time he went into town for supplies, he saw them, small groups of neighbors whispering behind their hands. The man at the feed store rang him up without a word, avoiding eye contact. At the post office, a laminated flyer caught his eye, pinned at perfect right angles on the bulletin board. Community alert. Compliance in progress. Zone B under review. Residents advised to report anomalies. There was no picture. No address. Just the buzz of implication. Marcus Reed didn't need a picture. He knew exactly which zone he was in. When he stepped back onto his porch that night, something glinted in the dirt by the barn. Another sign. This one smaller, almost discreet. Tier 2, non-compliant. He stood there for a long moment, the mountain wind tugging at his sleeves. They thought they were putting him in a box. They didn't know the box was built for them. Marcus smiled, slow and dangerous. If they wanted a compliance issue, they were about to get one. Not from the farmer sipping coffee on his porch. From the Navy SEAL they hadn't realized they woke up, and he was just getting started. The next 2 days passed under a strange, charged quiet. Marcus Reed kept his routine steady, knowing that steady was the bait. Morning feedings, patrols along the fence line, tinkering with the old tractor, sitting on the porch like he had nothing better to do but sip coffee and watch the sky. From the outside, it must have looked like he was ignoring them. That was exactly what he wanted them to think. He wasn't ignoring them. He was setting the board. Trail cameras tucked into trees where no casual walker would spot them. Motion sensors disguised as irrigation stakes. Emergency lights wired to flip at a moment's notice. And on the old barn's rafters, his old friend, a silent alarm rigged to a fail-safe tripwire. It wasn't paranoia, it was preparation. Something Marcus had learned the hard way in a dozen countries that didn't appear on tourist maps. Because people who hid behind clipboards and fake authority were like termites. They didn't just nibble. They hollowed you out from the inside, and Marcus Reed wasn't built to be hollowed. On the third night they came back. It was just after 3 a.m., that deep, bottomless hour when the world forgets how to breathe. Marcus was awake already, sitting cross-legged on the floor by the front window, sipping cold coffee and watching the monitors flicker quietly in the dark. There they were. 5 heat signatures moving low and slow across the south pasture. One of them carried something bulky in their arms. Another 2 had walkie-talkies pressed to their mouths. Marcus exhaled through his nose, slow and steady. His hand moved without thinking, sliding across the floor to the small switch mounted under the windowsill. He didn't throw it yet. Let them come a little closer. Outside, the fake HOA enforcers crept along his fence line, wearing cheap tactical vests with "Compliance Patrol" ironed in crooked letters across the back. One carried a bolt cutter. Another had a clipboard tucked under his arm like it was a badge. They thought they were invisible. They thought they were in control. Marcus almost pitied them, until the 6th figure appeared. different. Heavier, moving with a tightness the others didn't have. This one wore black from boots to ball cap and carried what looked a lot like a real weapon slung over his back. Marcus's jaw set hard. Not a game anymore. He tapped the silent alarm trigger under the windowsill. Across the yard, floodlights exploded into life, turning night into high-noon chaos. Sirens blared from the barn's rafters. A loudspeaker he hadn't used since setting up the perimeter years ago crackled to life, blasting one clear message into the dark. "You are trespassing on private property. Leave immediately or law enforcement will be contacted." The reaction was almost comical. 3 of the patrol boys dropped flat to the ground like someone had pulled invisible strings. Another sprinted toward the tree line, stumbling over the wire fence and disappearing into the dark. Only the man in black stood his ground, turning slowly to scan the house, shoulders rolling back in a loose, ready stance. Marcus watched him through the scope he'd mounted behind the curtain. Not to shoot, to study. The man's movements were deliberate, efficient, wrong for a local bully pretending to be tough. No, this one had training. Maybe not as much as Marcus, but enough to be dangerous to civilians. Marcus didn't blink. Not a muscle moved. He needed to see what they would do when they realized they weren't in charge. Clipboard guy was shouting now, his voice high and cracking under the sirens. "Plan Bravo! Plan Bravo!" There was no Plan Bravo. Marcus knew that tone. He'd heard it 1,000 times before. Panic trying to dress itself in authority. The man in black reached for his radio, hissed something Marcus couldn't catch, and then, without warning, they charged. Not all of them. Just 2. One from the front, bolting across the yard like a linebacker. Another trying to flank from the east side, where the corral fence dipped low behind the barn. Amateurs. Marcus moved. Boots silent on the hardwood, door swinging wide without a sound. He didn't shout, didn't warn. He just stepped off the porch and moved straight into the darkness between the floodlights. The first attacker never saw him coming. Marcus caught him mid-sprint, ducked low and drove a shoulder into the man's gut, lifting and turning in one smooth motion. The guy hit the ground with a stunned grunt, air whooshing out of his lungs. His fake taser clattered uselessly across the dirt. The second man, seeing his buddy go down, skidded to a stop, fumbling for his radio. Too slow. Marcus closed the distance, twisted the radio out of his hand, and planted a firm palm against the man's chest, shoving him back hard enough to send him sprawling into a thorn bush. Only the man in black remained upright, halfway across the field now, watching Marcus with a stillness that was too calm for the situation. Marcus stepped forward, hands loose at his sides. The man in black tilted his head slightly, assessing. Then he said it. "You're not just some rancher." Marcus smiled, slow and humorless. "And you're not just some HOA goon." The man's mouth twitched, like he wanted to say more, but headlights swept across the driveway before he could. Sheriff Tomlin's cruiser roared up the gravel, red and blue lights flashing, siren a short whoop before cutting off. The man in black tensed, calculating. Marcus could see it in his posture, the debate between fighting, fleeing, or surrendering. Marcus made the decision for him. "You can run," he said quietly, "but you won't make it 10 feet. The man's gaze flicked to Marcus's boots, the relaxed stance, the absolute certainty in his voice. He knew, not a rancher, not a farmer. Something else. Something trained. Slowly, almost respectfully, the man in black raised his hands. Sheriff Tomlin stepped out, hand on his holster, eyes wide as he took in the scene. The 2 fake HOA guys moaning on the ground, Marcus standing calmly under the harsh floodlights, and the man in black surrendering without a fight. Tomlin's mouth worked for a moment before he found his voice. "Marcus," he said finally, voice tight, You want to tell me what the hell happened here? Marcus Reed didn't take his eyes off the man in black. He just smiled, cold and steady. Looks like the neighborhood watch got a little overambitious. The sheriff's office was a squat building tucked between the hardware store and a diner that hadn't changed its menu since the 70s. It smelled like stale coffee and old paperwork, a scent Marcus knew too well from his past life. He sat at a scuffed metal table in a windowless room, arms folded, one boot propped casually on the leg of the chair across from him. His hat was pushed back on his head, eyes half-lidded but sharp underneath. Across from him, Deputy Lewis shuffled a stack of papers, sweat beading at his temple despite the humming AC. "So," Lewis started, voice too casual to be real, "you're telling me these guys weren't sanctioned by any real HOA?" Marcus tilted his head slightly. "I'm telling you they weren't sanctioned by anybody with legal authority. They were playing dress-up, and they picked the wrong yard." Lewis tried for a chuckle, but it fell flat. The tension in the room was like a loaded spring. Sheriff Tomlin came in then, holding a manila folder thick with the night's reports. He tossed it onto the table and leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Name's Caleb Vance," Tomlin said, jerking his chin toward the man in black, who was now sitting 2 doors down in a holding cell, still as stone. "Ex-private security. Worked overseas for a few shady outfits. No law enforcement background, no HOA certification." Marcus didn't move. "Figures." "He carried himself like he knew which way a muzzle points, but not how to hold a badge." Tomlin grunted. "The others are small fry. Local boys. Most of them didn't even know what they were signing up for. Said they were told it was a community compliance initiative. Promised $50 a patrol." Marcus let out a slow breath. "And Caleb?" Tomlin shook his head. "Tighter lips than a steel trap. Lawyered up the second we said the word conspiracy." Marcus wasn't surprised. Caleb was a professional at some point. Maybe washed up, maybe desperate, but still dangerous. Lewis flipped a page on his clipboard. "Thing is, boss, there's no record of any legitimate HOA operating under the Simmons Valley name, and the website they've been handing out. It's hosted on some offshore server, registered to a shell company." Marcus finally sat up straighter. "Shell company?" Tomlin nodded grimly. "Yeah. Tied to a bigger network. We're talking organized harassment, fraud, possibly land seizure scams." The room went cold. Marcus felt it in his gut. Not fear, recognition. He'd seen the pattern before, just not on American soil. "You think they picked me because I was new?" Marcus asked, voice low. Tomlin hesitated. "Not just new. Black, independent, ex-military. You don't fit the mold they want to carve out here. You stand out." Marcus absorbed that without flinching. It was the kind of truth he didn't need spelled out. "They thought they were dealing with a farmer who'd call 911 and pray for help," Marcus said. "Not someone who fights back." Lewis tapped his pen against his notes, a nervous tick. "Sheriff, you want me to start pulling land records?" "See if there's a pattern?" Tomlin nodded. "Yeah, start with properties adjacent to Marcus's. See who's sold recently, and check into that Simmons Valley paperwork. I want to know who filed it and when." Lewis hustled out of the room, grateful for the assignment. Tomlin turned back to Marcus. "You didn't file a formal complaint yet." Marcus shrugged. "Didn't need to. I wasn't looking for a courtroom fight. I was looking for them to realize they picked the wrong damn target." Tomlin's mouth twitched like he wanted to smile but thought better of it. "Well, you've got their attention now." A heavy silence fell between them. Finally, Tomlin pushed off the wall and crossed to the door. His hand rested on the knob, but he didn't turn it yet. "Listen," he said, voice lower now. This thing? It's bigger than Karen Simmons and her little clipboard army. Caleb's the kind of guy you hire when you want plausible deniability and no loose ends. Marcus leaned back, eyes narrowing. Meaning they weren't planning on leaving quietly if things went south. Meaning, Tomlin said carefully, if you hadn't been who you are, this could have ended a whole lot worse. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus said, almost to himself, "It still might." Tomlin gave a grim nod and left, the door clicking shut behind him. Marcus sat there a while longer, staring at nothing. Because the truth was, the more he peeled back the layers, the more he realized this wasn't about a ranch. It wasn't even about land. It was about control. And control, once challenged, always escalates. He thought about Caleb's eyes, sharp, assessing, almost curious even in surrender. Like he knew something Marcus hadn't seen yet. And for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt that old familiar current under his skin. Not fear, not anger. Readiness. He pushed back from the table, stood slowly, and adjusted his jacket. The scars on his knuckles itched, a phantom sensation from battles long past. His body knew before his mind admitted it. This wasn't over. It hadn't even started. Outside, dawn was just starting to split the horizon into bruised shades of purple and gold. The town would wake up soon. The coffee shop would open. People would pretend everything was normal, but Marcus Reed knew better. Because when you pushed the wrong man hard enough, when you sent fake soldiers to raid his home and underestimated the life he lived before he ever built that porch, you didn't just start a fight. You declared a war. And Marcus Reed, he'd never lost one he was willing to finish. Marcus pulled into his driveway just as the sun started dragging lazy shadows across the gravel. His truck, an old but immaculately kept Ford F-250, rumbled to a stop near the front porch. For a second he sat there, engine ticking as it cooled, his hands resting easy on the wheel. But inside, he was already moving, thinking 5 steps ahead, the same way he used to plan recon ops halfway across the world. He knew something bigger was brewing. He could feel it in the way the air seemed heavier, in the way birds scattered before the dusk settled. Old instincts, dulled but never dead. Max, his German shepherd, bounded up as he stepped out, tail wagging low and cautious. Marcus gave him a quick rub between the ears, the only outward sign of the battle playing out behind his eyes. Inside the house, he set his keys on the counter and immediately moved to the den. The place was sparse, utilitarian. A few photos on the mantel, family, his old SEAL team. But otherwise, it was the home of a man who valued readiness over sentimentality. Marcus knelt by the fireplace and pulled up a loose floorboard, revealing a secured lockbox underneath. Inside were items he hadn't touched in years, but had never truly let go of. Encrypted communication gear, a set of tactical maps, and something even more important, a journal. Not just any journal, just any. It was the kind he had kept back in the teams, full of notes on local contacts, threat assessments, exit strategies. He flipped it open now and scanned a page he hadn't read in a decade. Contingency Planning 101. Hope for Peace. Prepare for war. The words hit different now. His burner phone buzzed on the counter. Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides and picked it up. Unknown number. He answered anyway. "You've got movement coming tonight," a voice rasped. Male. Cautious. "Not official, not local. Think bigger." "Who is this?" Marcus asked, voice low. "Call it a professional courtesy," the voice said. "Some people noticed when you embarrassed the Simmons Valley project. They don't like attention." Before Marcus could press for more, the line went dead. He stood there for a moment, the faint hum of the refrigerator the only sound. Then he moved. Fast. Out back, He double-checked the perimeter sensors he'd installed last year. Nothing fancy, just good hardware, hardwired, with no wireless signals to jam. He rerouted the triggers to a silent alarm that would buzz a small receiver on his belt. Inside, he loaded 3 old shotguns with beanbag rounds and placed them at strategic points around the house. Non-lethal force first. Always escalate last. He wasn't looking to hurt anyone, but he wasn't looking to lose either. By the time the sun was gone and the sky thick with stars, Marcus had his ranch locked down tighter than most embassies. He brewed a strong pot of coffee, sat on the porch with Max at his feet, and waited. It didn't take long. Just past midnight, the motion detector at the east fence line gave a faint buzz. Marcus didn't even flinch. He slipped into the shadows by the porch, blending into the dark like a ghost. Through the night vision monocular slung around his neck, he saw them, 3 figures moving low and fast. They wore black tactical vests, but the way they handled themselves was sloppy. Weekend warriors playing dress-up, not soldiers. Not threats, not yet. Marcus watched as they moved toward his barn. 2 hung back, setting up what looked like a perimeter. The third, clipboard in hand, approached the door like he was about to hand out a parking ticket. Marcus almost laughed. He let them get closer. Closer. Right until the first one leaned in to staple something to the barn door. That was when Marcus struck. He whistled low and sharp. Max shot out from the darkness like a missile, barking deep and furious. The man at the door yelped and stumbled back into the dirt, dropping the clipboard. The others froze. Before they could react, Marcus stepped out of the shadows, a shotgun cradled loose and ready in his hands. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, voice smooth as steel. "Lose your way?" The man on the ground scrambled backward. We have legal authority." You're in violation." Marcus cut him off with a chuckle. "Son, I've seen better organized ambushes from junior ROTC." The leader, a broad man with a thick beard, tried to save face. "You're harboring unauthorized structures under Phase 2 guidelines of the Simmons Valley Charter." Marcus's face didn't change, but inside he was filing the phrase away. Phase 2. This was bigger than a nosy neighbor with a power trip. This was coordinated. "You got paperwork?" Marcus asked, stepping closer. The man thrust a crumpled envelope toward him. Marcus took it without lowering his weapon, flipped it open with one hand, and scanned it. Fake logos, typos, no county seals. It was about as official as a lemonade stand license. He tossed it back at the man's feet. "Wrong ranch," Marcus said quietly. "Wrong man." The men shifted nervously. The dog growled, low and menacing. "I suggest you walk away," Marcus said, "before you find out just how wrong you really are." For a second it hung there. The decision: fight or flee. Beardman chose wrong. He reached for something on his belt. Probably pepper spray, maybe worse. Marcus was faster. One smooth motion, he racked the shotgun and fired a beanbag round straight into the man's chest. It hit with a loud thump, dropping him like a sack of bricks. The other 2 bolted immediately, scrambling for the fence line. Max chased them just to the edge, barking ferociously, before trotting back to Marcus's side, tail high with pride. Marcus walked over to Beardman, who was wheezing on the ground, struggling to catch his breath. He crouched down, the night heavy around them. "You tell whoever sent you," Marcus said, voice soft and lethal, "that I'm not some scared landowner they can bully. You tell them they're picking a fight they can't even begin to understand." The man groaned. Marcus stood, wiped his hands on his jeans, and whistled for Max. Together they walked back toward the house, leaving Beardman gasping in the dirt under a sky so full of stars it looked like it might split open. Inside, Marcus poured himself a fresh cup of coffee and sat by the window, eyes sharp. The first skirmish was over, but the war was just getting started, and they still had no idea who they were dealing with. Marcus didn't sleep that night. He knew better. After years in operations overseas, he understood the most dangerous moments weren't the attack itself. They came in the aftermath, when enemies regrouped, recalibrated, and returned meaner and smarter. By sunrise, he was already in town. The diner buzzed with its usual small-town rhythm, coffee brewing, forks clinking against plates, the low hum of gossip. Marcus, still dusty from the night before, slid into a booth near the window where he could keep his back to the wall. Max laid obediently at his feet, ears twitching at every door creak. Lucy, the server who knew everyone's order by heart, brought over black coffee without asking. "You're up early," she said, half teasing. "Had a long night," Marcus answered, voice low. She nodded like she knew better than to ask more. "Anything else?" Marcus hesitated. "Yeah. Has anyone new been hanging around town?" "Strangers?" Lucy leaned in slightly. "Funny you ask. Last few days we've had some suits stopping by. Out-of-towners. Don't fit in, you know. Not local types." "Government?" She shrugged. "Could be. Could just be trouble." He nodded once, filed that away. His gut twisted a little tighter. Lucy moved on, and Marcus pulled out a small notepad he kept folded in his back pocket. A habit from old days. Write it down, don't trust memory alone. He jotted, "Suits in town. New surveillance pattern, increased pressure, phase 2 underway." He sipped his coffee, eyes distant. He didn't have to wonder if last night's botched raid was over. It wasn't. It had just started the next phase. And sure enough, when Marcus returned to the ranch an hour later, a surprise was waiting. Parked neatly just outside his gate was a gleaming black SUV. Tinted windows, federal plates. Standing beside it was a woman in a sharp navy suit and polished heels that looked wildly out of place in the dirt and dust of Simmons Valley. She smiled when she saw him approach, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached the eyes. It was the tight, rehearsed kind that government operatives wore like armor. "Mr. "Marcus Hayes," she called, voice light but carrying. Marcus said nothing at first. He just locked the gate behind him, Max positioning at his side. "You're trespassing," Marcus said evenly. "Just here to have a conversation," the woman replied. "My name's Agent Fallon. Department of Rural Infrastructure and Compliance." Marcus let the silence stretch long enough to make her shift her weight uneasily. "We're aware of some misunderstandings," she continued, "between yourself and the Simmons Valley Homeowners Association." Marcus chuckled dryly. "Misunderstandings? That what you call sending armed idiots onto private land in the middle of the night?" Fallon's smile thinned. "That wasn't sanctioned. Let's just say certain initiatives have outpaced their original mandates." Marcus crossed his arms. "Get to the part where you tell me why you're really here." Fallon adjusted her blazer. "We're offering you an opportunity, an early settlement. Step down. Sell your property to one of our partner organizations. No court cases. No further escalation. Clean and simple." Marcus stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. "You think I fought for this land, bled for it, just to hand it over because you showed up in a rental car with a clipboard?" Fallon's eyes cooled. "This isn't personal. It's progress." Marcus took a step forward, so close he could see the faint lines of stress at the corners of her eyes. "You don't know a damn thing about progress," he said, voice sharp as a blade. "You just know how to follow orders." For the first time, her confidence cracked. Marcus turned his back on her, unbothered, and started walking up the drive. Fallon called after him. "Mr. Hayes, think carefully. There are protocols you haven't seen yet." Resistance complicates things. He didn't even break stride. Then make it complicated. Inside the house, he locked the door, set the perimeter to high alert, and picked up his secure line. He didn't call the sheriff this time. He called an old teammate, Andre Diesel Booker. After 2 rings, Diesel answered. "About time you rang," Diesel said, voice gravelly and familiar. "I need eyes," Marcus said without preamble, "and muscle." "On the move already," Diesel said. "Got word from a buddy in Intel. They're running something dirty in your neck of the woods. Figured you'd be in it knee-deep." "Deeper than you know," Marcus said grimly. "Sit tight," Diesel said. "Old ghosts are stirring." When Marcus hung up, he felt a rare thing stir in his chest. Hope. Not because Diesel was coming, because he knew Diesel wouldn't be coming alone. Night fell again over Simmons Valley. The stars hung heavy overhead, and somewhere in the distance, where the hills turned black against the horizon, headlights appeared, silent, steady, unstoppable. The real war was about to begin. And for the first time, Marcus smiled. They still had no idea they were about to pick a fight with a Navy SEAL. A real one. Not some suburban warlord, but someone who had written the manual on how to win battles that never made the headlines. This wasn't going to be survival. This was going to be a reckoning. The cold before dawn carried a special kind of silence, the kind Marcus recognized from a dozen hostile zones overseas. It was the pause right before something cracked open. He could feel it in his bones, a hum beneath the skin, old instincts rising. The lights from the SUV disappeared an hour ago, but Marcus knew better than to assume they had given up. He sat in the shadow of the barn, Max resting against his leg, both of them still, listening. The perimeter cameras fed quietly to his tablet. Every few minutes, a flicker of movement across the eastern fence line. Flashlights muted. No vehicles now. They were coming on foot, trying to be clever. Marcus tapped a silent alert button tucked into his belt loop. Within seconds, the response was moving. Diesel's voice came through a secured channel. Visual on 4 targets moving south by the fence, one carrying what looks like a breaching tool. Marcus responded low, measured. "Copy." "Hold position. Let them show their hand." Max shifted but stayed low, his body tense. He knew the dance as well as Marcus did. Another flicker on the camera. Then 2 more shapes breaking off west, moving in a flanking pattern. "They're splitting up," Diesel whispered. "Sloppy. They have no perimeter training." Marcus allowed himself the smallest grin. "They're used to scaring civilians, not fighting soldiers." On the northern fence, a sharp pop sounded, someone tripping a wire. A red flare exploded overhead, bathing the field in crimson light. Movement erupted everywhere. The fake HOA troopers scrambled, shouting over radios, disoriented. It was time. Marcus gave the signal. In perfect silence, 4 figures moved through the fields: Diesel, Torres, Mason, and Bellamy. Men who had once taken cities apart piece by piece on foreign soil. Now they worked methodically, cutting off each intruder's path with precision and overwhelming force. Marcus moved too. He broke from the barn like a storm, fast and low. He crossed the open ground toward the eastern breach, where 2 men fumbled at the fence with bolt cutters. The first never saw him coming. Marcus grabbed the man's arm, twisted, and used his momentum to drive him face first into the dirt. Before the second could even raise his tool, Marcus snatched it, tossed it away, and pressed the guy's own weight into his shoulder joint until he yelped. "No more playing soldier," Marcus whispered coldly into the man's ear. Down by the western fence, Diesel's team herded their captives back toward the driveway. A few tried to resist, but the special ops boys weren't here for negotiations. Within 15 minutes, all 7 invaders were on their knees by the front gate, hands zip-tied behind their backs with industrial ties, Marcus kept for ranch repairs. Diesel stood over them, arms crossed. These clowns thought they could breach a SEAL compound. Cute. One of the men, young, sweaty, and terrified, started babbling. "We didn't know, man. We didn't know who lived here." Marcus knelt in front of him, gaze level. "Did you know you were trespassing?" The man nodded miserably. "Did you know you were threatening private citizens with weapons?" Another nod. "Then you knew enough." The man dropped his head. Diesel chuckled darkly. "You sure have a way of hosting welcome parties." Marcus didn't smile. He pointed at the man who seemed to be the ringleader, the same clipboard carrier from before. "Who sent you?" The man tightened his jaw. Said nothing. Diesel leaned close, voice lazy but dangerous. "You might want to rethink that silence. Because right now, the law's 5 minutes away, and in about 10, the feds will be asking you questions you do not want to answer." The ringleader cracked. "We're just contractors." "Community Compliance Corps, hired security." "By who?" Marcus pressed. "I don't know real names," the guy stammered. "Our handler used the code name Indigo." Marcus exchanged a glance with Diesel. Indigo. The name hit him like a slap. In his previous life, Indigo was attached to black budget projects, the kind that didn't officially exist. Now it was tied to a rogue operation using fake HOA authority to seize private property under the radar. Marcus stood slowly. "You're going to tell the sheriff everything," he said, "and you're going to pray you're small enough they don't decide to make an example out of you." Right on cue, Deputy Briggs's cruiser crested the hill, lights flashing. Max barked once, sharp and pleased. As the cruisers rolled in and the captured attackers were taken into custody, Marcus and Diesel leaned against the fender of Marcus's truck. "You think that's all of them?" Diesel asked. Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, this was just a forward team, softening the ground." Diesel grunted. "Figures. When you shine a light on a cockroach, you never find just one." "Exactly." Across the field, a deputy lifted a clipboard into an evidence bag, careful not to smudge the fingerprints. Marcus caught a glimpse before it disappeared. Maps, schedules, pictures of his ranch, a checklist of steps for seizure. It wasn't over. It had just begun. The real architects were still out there, and they had no idea that Marcus had just flipped their entire operation inside out. And he was only getting started. He walked back up to the porch, Max at his heel, the cold morning wind tugging at his jacket. Tomorrow, the battle would move to courtrooms, newspapers, and maybe even Capitol Hill. But tonight? Tonight, he had sent a message no one could misinterpret. You don't raid a Navy SEAL's home and walk away. You crawl. Or you don't leave at all. And somewhere out there, Indigo would soon learn what it meant to pick a fight with a man who didn't just survive war. He mastered it. The sunrise brought no warmth, only a pale gray light stretching over Marcus Reed's battered ranch. The fields, still raw from the chaos of the night before, felt heavier somehow, like they knew more trouble was circling. Inside his kitchen, the coffee pot burbled weakly. Marcus stood at the counter, boots planted, arms crossed, staring at a file Deputy Briggs had left behind. A preliminary report on the 7 captured assailants, all independent contractors. all paid through shell corporations, all pointing back to a single shadow: Indigo. The name sat heavy in Marcus's chest, dredging up memories he had buried deep. Missions that never made the news, files burned before sunrise, friends who didn't come back. Max padded in, nudged Marcus's leg, sensing the weight in the air. Marcus finally moved, picked up his burner phone, and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. 3 rings. Then a voice, clipped and cautious. "Reed?" "It's me." A pause thick enough to choke on. "You're supposed to be dead, or invisible." "Yeah," Marcus said, voice even. "Turns out being invisible doesn't stop ghosts from finding you." The voice softened a fraction. "You need backup?" "Not yet, but I need intel." A sigh. "Still cleaning up the government's mess, huh?" Marcus let the silence answer for him. "All right," the voice said. "Send me what you have." Marcus sent the photos, the clipboard files, the surveillance screenshots. 2 minutes later, his phone buzzed. "Jesus," the voice muttered. "You're not dealing with neighborhood busybodies." "This is third-tier experimental ops, psychological compliance enforcement, real black book stuff." "I figured." "You need to understand," the voice continued, urgent now. "Indigo isn't just a code name anymore. It's a prototype. They're setting up microcells in rural areas, testing control models. If your ranch made it onto their list, it wasn't random." Marcus leaned against the counter, jaw tight. "They marked me before I even moved in." "Exactly. You're a veteran. You're self-sufficient. You're a threat to the model." Marcus closed his eyes for a second, the rage simmering under his skin. "You have 2 options," the voice said. "Expose them or disappear." Marcus opened his eyes, cold and clear. "I'm tired of disappearing." The line went dead. Marcus slid the phone into his pocket and looked out the window. In the distance, a dust cloud kicked up along the main road. A caravan of trucks and SUVs. Headed straight for him. He didn't panic. He moved. In less than 5 minutes, he had his emergency cache packed. Documents, hard drives, a satellite uplink, and enough gear to hole up if necessary. He donned his battered tactical jacket, the one that still bore faded patches from deployments long past. No flashy insignia. Just history stitched into every thread. He checked the cameras again. The lead vehicle wasn't marked. No government plates. But he recognized the style. The subtle armor, the tinted windows, the deliberate spacing between cars. They weren't HOA cosplay players anymore. These were the real wolves. Marcus keyed up a secure frequency. "Diesel, you copy?" The response crackled back almost instantly. "Copy. Got incoming. 5 vehicles, looks like heavy hands. ETA? 3 minutes. Mobilizing." Marcus killed the feed and moved to the porch. Max followed, growling low. By the time the first SUV skidded to a stop at the gate, Diesel and Torres were in position, hidden behind strategic cover points across the property. A man stepped out of the lead SUV. Black suit. Crisp shirt, aviators, the works. But no badge, no obvious authority. He moved with that slimy confidence Marcus remembered from briefings about field handlers. Government dogs unleashed without leashes. The man stopped 10 feet from the gate and raised his voice. "Mr. Reed, we're here to offer you a solution." Marcus stayed silent. The man smiled like a shark. "You've become a complication, a public one. Your little videos racked up more views than a congressional campaign ad." Marcus still didn't answer. "You can either come with us quietly," the man continued, voice syrupy, Or you can force our hand. I'm told you're smart enough to know which way this ends. Marcus stepped down off the porch, every movement deliberate. You don't belong here, he said. The man's smile sharpened. Neither do you anymore. Out of the corner of his eye, Marcus saw Diesel shift slightly. Waiting. Ready. You think you're a patriot, Reed? You think you're preserving something? You're just outdated. A relic. The world's moving on without you. Marcus took one slow step closer to the gate. You sent civilians after me, he said, voice low. You marked my property. You hurt my dog. The man's smile faltered, just for a breath. You think I'm going to let that slide? Marcus said. You're alone, the man countered, bluffing now. No one's coming to save you. Marcus smiled then, a real smile, the kind that didn't reach the eyes. You brought the wrong fight to the wrong man, he said. He lifted a hand casually, almost lazily, and every light on the ranch snapped on at once. Floodlights, motion sensors, drones whirring to life above the fields. The man's composure cracked, and then came the unmistakable click-clack of a shotgun being racked. Diesel stepped out from the tree line, weapon leveled. Torres emerged near the barn, AR at low ready. Bellamy perched on the roof, laser sight resting on the SUV. The man's hand twitched toward his belt. Marcus's voice sliced through the cold air. Don't. The man froze. We're recording, Marcus said. Streaming, multiple uplinks. Anything happens here, your face goes public in 30 seconds. The man clenched his jaw, every ounce of his training fighting the situation spiraling out of control. This isn't over, he hissed. No, Marcus agreed. It's just beginning. The man motioned to his convoy. Slowly, grudgingly, the vehicles reversed, tires spitting gravel. Marcus watched them leave, heart steady, mind sharper than it had been in years. He knew it wouldn't stop them. They'd regroup, regather. But now so would he. Only this time he wasn't playing defense. This time he was going to burn their whole damn operation to the ground. And every last one of them would learn exactly what it meant to pick a fight with a Navy SEAL who wasn't afraid to fight dirty when the mission demanded it. The next move was his, and he was ready. The next 48 hours moved like a riptide, fast, disorienting, and impossible to fight head-on. Marcus Reed knew better than to chase the current. He stayed low, watched, planned. While the convoy retreated that morning, Marcus's surveillance systems picked up 3 unmarked drones, sweeping the area within hours. They weren't HOA hobby drones anymore. They were the sleek kind he remembered from reconnaissance missions overseas. Thermal capable, silent at altitude, invisible to casual observers. They were watching him, but he was watching back. By noon, Marcus had traced one drone signal to a nearby mobile unit parked at an abandoned gas station 3 miles away. Diesel and Torres ran a quiet sweep, confirming what Marcus suspected. A mobile command post. High-grade comms gear. Satellite uplinks. No official markings, no warrants. No jurisdiction. They had escalated the game. The mistake they made was thinking Marcus wouldn't escalate with them. That night, under the cover of darkness thicker than tar, Marcus slipped out across the east field. Max padded silently at his side, paw now healed, loyalty burning brighter than ever. Marcus reached the tree line overlooking the mobile unit. He watched through a low-light scope, cataloging every movement, every misstep. When the operators inside took a shift change, Marcus moved like water, silent, formless. He planted remote blockers around the perimeter, killing their signal in under 30 seconds. When the unit's screens flickered and died, confusion erupted inside. Men scrambled, checking wires, radios, laptops. Marcus stepped into the open, silhouette framed by the moon. One of the men raised a weapon. Marcus didn't hesitate. A flashbang rolled under the mobile unit's wheels, detonating with a pop so loud it punched the air itself. Men staggered out coughing, blinded, stunned. Marcus disarmed the first one with a precise twist of the wrist. The second was handled with a swift knee to the gut and a clean elbow to the temple. Max lunged at the third, herding him like an unruly sheep toward the fence line where Diesel and Torres waited. Minutes later, the scene was contained. 4 operators, zip-tied and blinking in disbelief, lay on the ground while Marcus rifled through their command center. He found files, not just on him, not just on his property, but on over 30 residents within a 50-mile radius. Names, family details, voting records, even psychological profiles. Marcus found a master file labeled Tier 1 Influence Disruption Targets. He opened it and found a single word written next to his name. Prototype. The rage was a low simmer now, cold and clinical. They hadn't just tried to ruin him. They had planned to study him, to replicate him, to weaponize or eliminate anyone like him. He uploaded everything to a secure server. Then he called in a favor. When the county sheriff's department arrived an hour later, it wasn't just a few cruisers. It was a full task force, backed by a federal observer flown in from D.C. The moment the feds saw the gear, the files, the private ops manifest, everything shifted. This wasn't a local problem anymore. This was national. By dawn, the mobile unit was impounded. The operators were in custody. And the first official federal investigation into rogue HOA-based compliance cells had been launched. But Marcus wasn't finished. 2 days later, under the protection of a whistleblower coalition, Marcus stood before a packed town hall meeting. Not a courtroom, not a government building, a place where ordinary people could listen. He stood tall, boots dusty, jacket worn but clean, his voice steady. What happened here, he said, wasn't just about one ranch or one man. It was about control. About people who think silence is compliance and fear is governance. The crowd leaned forward, hanging onto every word. I didn't fight for this country just to watch it turn into a place where neighbors spy on each other, where laws are invented behind closed doors, where fear wins. He paused, letting the weight settle. You don't have to be a Navy SEAL to fight back. You just have to refuse to be small. You have to refuse to be invisible. Applause rose, not the polite kind, but the raw, thunderous kind that shakes walls. Later, after the hall emptied, after the media vans left, Marcus stood alone on the front steps. Diesel approached, chuckling low. Didn't know you had a preacher in you, Reed. Marcus smiled, tired but genuine. Preaching's just tactical truth wrapped in a few metaphors. They both laughed, easy and free. In the weeks that followed, Karen's shadow network collapsed. Arrests swept through nearby counties. Investigations revealed layers of corruption that reached further than anyone had guessed. The federal case sparked new regulations protecting rural landowners from predatory compliance operations. Oversight boards were formed. Laws were rewritten. But Marcus knew better than to believe in total victories. The world didn't change overnight. Bad ideas didn't die. They just got quieter, waited for softer soil. Still, he had planted something stronger here, something louder than fear. A reminder. A stand, a refusal. Back at the ranch, Max barked once, chasing a squirrel along the fence. The sun dipped low, casting everything in a fiery glow. Marcus picked up a hammer, walked toward a new sign he had made himself. Fresh wood. Clean letters, no trespassing, no exceptions. This land was defended, not just by guns or cameras, but by something harder to tear down. Pride. Honor. and the memory of every fight fought, every line held, by those who knew exactly what was worth standing for. He drove the first nail into the post, feeling the impact resonate through his bones. Not a battle cry, a promise. The camera faded out there. The story, though, didn't. Because somewhere, someone else just heard about Marcus Reed. And maybe, just maybe, they'd think twice before ever underestimating the man behind the fence again.